Let's talk about some pitchers who are off to weird starts this season. Pablo Lopez. We spoke about the White Sox and how great of a matchup they should be. And then Pablo Lopez comes out and just has a stinker against this team. 4 innings, 3 runs allowed, 6 strikeouts, only 5 swinging strikes on 76 pitches. He gave up some hard contact. Looks like he did not have any of his secondary pitches. He just went fastball heavy in the start, threw it 61% of the time. Mm-hmm. His velocity was also down. I saw afterwards, they said there's no concern physically. It might have been related to the weather. It was 52 degrees in Minnesota in this start. And, just on the season, he's had 2 great starts, 3 not so great starts. It's a 4.39 ERA, but all the peripheral stats still look really good. It's just kind of been a bit of a weird start for Pablo.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern because I think the last fastball he threw in this start was 91 miles per hour.
That's not good.
That's not good because I think the first one he threw was like 96 or something. So yeah, that's a significant difference. But yeah, after the game, both he and the manager said that he was fine physically. There was nothing wrong. The quote was like, it was a mentality / conviction issue. And that's why his velocity was down. I don't necessarily know what to make of that, but if they're not concerned, I'm not going to be concerned. I think weird is the right word for the way Pablo Lopez season has gone so far, because it hasn't been nearly as effective as last season. And you look into the underlying numbers for the arsenal, and nothing really looks out of whack. Like the whiff rates, the quality of contact, all for the most part looks very similar to what it was last season. So I don't really have any reason to think he pitched over his head last season. I don't really have any reason to think that he's suddenly a significantly worse pitcher. So my concern level on Pablo Lopez is extremely low.
Kevin Gausman turned in a quality start, but also kind of a weird one. 6 2/3 innings, 3 unearned runs, only 2 strikeouts to 1 walk, 4 swinging strikes on 99 pitches. Just leaned all the way into his splitter in this start. Kevin Gausman did 52% usage, and it was not a good pitch for him. This was his first time throwing more than 5 innings in a start this season. He's got a 5.57 ERA, a 1.57 whip. He dealt with the shoulder in spring training, so this might also be start of it might be an extended spring training for Kevin Gausman, I guess you could say, but I feel like he's just gone through these, I guess, kind of wacky or inconsistent stretches because he's a splitter pitcher, and a pitcher who relies on that pitch that much. These things could kind of happen sometimes.
Yeah, and it's not just that he's a splitter pitcher, but he's really, for the most part, one of the most extreme 2-pitch pitchers in baseball. And that might just leave him with a narrower margin for error than some of the other pitchers in his range. And maybe coming back from that shoulder injury, he's just not 100% there yet. Not to say that he's not 100% healthy. It just, like you said, he's working his arm strength up. Maybe he's, where he would normally be at the end of spring training. And I can't say I have no concerns given the shoulder issue and the fact that his velocity has been down. It was down again in this start after being up in his most recent one before that. So it's concerning. I think I lean towards Kevin Gausman being a buy low candidate, but I wish I could say that with more conviction.
If you can turn Max Fried into Kevin Gausman, would you do it?
I'd rather have Gausman, yes.
All right, let's talk about Grayson Rodriguez. He was hit hard at the Angels, 4 1/3 innings, 11 hits, 7 earned runs, but he had 7 strikeouts to 1 walk and 14 swinging strikes. So like these others, quite a weird start. He hadn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in a start since July 17th of last year, but it was lots of hard contact in this one. And looking into Grayson Rodriguez, I don't really understand what's going on. I feel like we've had a conversation about this, Chris, the slider cutter kind of thing that he's throwing this year. And it looks like he's ditched his slider from last season, and he's throwing a different version of the cutter. The cutter was really bad for him last season. The velocity on this cutter is down almost 3 miles per hour, but the spin rate on the pitch is up. So I wonder if he's just kind of blended his slider and his cutter together, and this is the pitch that Grayson Rodriguez has come up with. maybe it's the Corbin Burns effect, who is now his teammate and on the pitching staff. And obviously he throws an amazing cutter. What do you make of Grayson Rodriguez this season so far?
So one thing that I had seen when he made his last start, Grayson Rodriguez, was I think it was Craig Goldstein from Baseball Prospectus had pointed out that their version of, I think they have their own like proprietary stuff / pitching quality / arsenal stat, and their version of that was picking up on two separate pitches. They were picking up on both a cutter and a slider, and that's probably the explanation for why the cutter velocity is down from last season, is that Baseball Savant is still classifying both pitches as a cutter, but they're probably different pitches. But yeah, I mean, the cutter was a pretty bad pitch for him last year when he threw it, which wasn't all that often. It hasn't been a very good pitch for him this season either. 390 expected WOBA, lowest whiff rate among his pitches. So I don't know. I think he is, Grayson Rodriguez, that is still kind of figuring out what the best approach is. He gave up 4 batted balls on that pitch today, 101 mile per hour average exit velocity. So I remain optimistic, but it's been a rougher ride than we hoped, given that Grayson Rodriguez looked like that he had figured it out in the second half of last season. And I think it might just be the case that he's not quite an ace yet, is maybe the way I'd say it. That he's a really good pitcher, top 20 in fantasy, but probably not a top 10 guy.
There might be a buy low window here because the ERA is 4.45. The FIP is 3.57. It's a 3.36 xFIP, 10.8 K per 9. So everything under the hood looks pretty good for Grayson Rodriguez. Would you rather have him or Max Fried?
Ooh, I think I'd rather have Grayson Rodriguez. Yes, I had Grayson Rodriguez ranked ahead before this start. I'm not going to change that.
Okay. Michael King had a rough start in Coors Field, 3 2/3 innings, 6 runs allowed, 4 of those were earned, 3 more walks in this one. He now has 3+ walks in 3 of 6 starts. He's up to 5.3 walks per 9 on the season. His career before this season, 3 walks per 9. So I keep saying and thinking that the walks are going to get better and the control is going to improve for Michael King. I don't know if there's much we could take away from this specific start in Coors Field, Chris.
Yeah.
But I still have to think that there's going to be some kind of regression on the control here.
I mean, that the thing that's so hard about this, though, is, and I agree, we shouldn't take anything from almost any start at Coors Field. Remember, Ryan Feltner had 10 strikeouts in a Coors start a couple weeks ago. He hasn't come anywhere close to that since. Coors is a weird place to pitch. And even if you have a seemingly good matchup, it's not really about the quality of the hitters that you're facing. Your pitches do not move the same at elevation. And so I don't want to take anything from this. The thing with Michael King is I don't know how much his career numbers matter in projecting forward, right? Like, okay, he had a 7.4 walks per 9 or 7.4% walk rate last season, 8% in 2022. He wasn't starting. I mean, like, he was for a month, but he wasn't going as deep into games as he's being asked to right now. He wasn't doing that while being expected to continue doing it for the next 5 months after this, which is there's a big difference, I think, between getting to September and saying, you just got to make it through your next 5 starts, and getting to being in April, making 5 starts and knowing I got to make 28 more if I stay healthy. And so I tend to think that what we're seeing from Michael King is more like what he is as a starter than what he was as a reliever. And I'm pretty uninterested in him. I don't know if I'd necessarily say I can drop him, but I'm not viewing Michael King as a difference maker. He's outside my top 60 starting pitchers, and that was before this start.
Okay, I still have him top 40. I've got a rankings update coming Wednesday, and I think I was just a high guy on Michael King coming into the season. He is going to drop down a little bit for me just because he has been so inconsistent this year, and I can't dispute that at this point. And there just have been so many starting pitchers who have elevated their game since the start of the season. So he'll drop down a little bit. I will say if anyone is on the verge of dropping him, I would just try like the ultimate buy low offer and just see if I can get Michael King for next to nothing.
By the way, before we move on, you didn't mention it in the news and notes, but I don't want to get too deep into the start or into the podcast without mentioning Framber Valdez may pitch this weekend.
Yes, that was, I believe he threw a bullpen either yesterday or Sunday.
Yeah, and they mentioned he might start in that Mexico City series against the Rockies. And the
return.
Yeah, the start with Michael King here jogged my memory of that from earlier today. And to be clear, if Framber Valdez returns this weekend, do not start him. No. Because the Mexico City ballpark is, I think, about 2,000 feet, maybe 2,300 feet higher in elevation than Coors Field, and is also a really small park relative to Coors Field. Coors Field is actually the largest park in the majors. There were, I think, 11 home runs hit in one of those two games last year. I think there might have been like 15 in the two games combined. So don't start Framber Valdez, but I wanted to make sure we didn't go too far into the podcast without mentioning that Framber Valdez could be back this week.
Yes, and that is definitely fair. I'm just going to throw the last four names that I have on this list at you because I want to keep things moving after this. But Luis Severino, a quality start at the Giants, continues to not have his slider. Yeah. The underlying numbers are still pretty good, though, and he's getting lots of ground balls. I wonder if this is just a different version of Severino that could be good, but just not as good as we've seen in the past. James Paxton doesn't look anything like the same pitcher from the Red Sox last year. He has 17 walks to 11 strikeouts over 20 and a third innings, and he's still 93% roster. That feels like that should not be the case. Like, I think I would drop James Paxton for Eric Fetty if I could. And then two other names, Christopher Sanchez and Andrew Abbott. They both had rough starts going up against each other. Sanchez, the control is a little bit worrisome because outside of last season, he was not a good control pitcher. And so far this year, it's up over 4 walks per 9. But man, everything else still looks really good. So I think I'm buying Christopher Sanchez and Andrew Abbott. I just don't trust it.
I think you could go ahead and drop Andrew Abbott and not really have any concerns about it. Because
would you drop him for Fetty?
Sure. I mean, I would drop him. I guess if there are any leagues where Edward Cabrera is available and Andrew Abbott is on your roster, go ahead and do that first. But yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with dropping James Paxton as well. Sanchez, I think I was maybe a little more skeptical of him than you and Scott were coming in, so I'm a little more inclined to be concerned about the control, but I wouldn't be actively looking to drop him right now. And Severino, I guess part of my struggle is that I am maybe anchoring to the person that Luis Severino used to be. And, you know, he had that incredible slider and was one of the best strikeout pitchers in baseball. And maybe he just can't be that anymore, but he can still be an effective pitcher. But it just, I don't know, man. It feels like, was last year or was it 2 years ago, the year when Noah Syndergaard like got off to a decent start, had a decent ERA, but wasn't getting any strikeouts. And it would just, that's what it feels like, where like, yeah, maybe he can still be effective for stretches, but I don't have much reason to believe that Luis Severino is like a must roster pitcher moving forward.
I would agree with that if the strikeout rate was lower, but so far it hasn't been.
Yeah, it's okay.
8.7 K per 9 and a 58% ground ball rate.
Yeah.
If he holds those two rates, he could still be good.
Yeah, I guess there's an aspect of like damning with faint praise and saying that like I guess he could be like Ranger Suarez.
Yeah, which, you know,
could be a useful pitcher. Yeah. So
50-ish starting pitcher, right?
He doesn't have the control that Suarez does. So that's the thing, is that you're looking at it's like an 11% K minus walk ratio, or at least it was entering today. I don't know what it is after today. I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair to Luis Severino because I want him to be something else, and maybe I'm holding that against him. And And I'll grant that might be unfair. So
I was pretty skeptical when, like, just going into his Fangraphs page before I got there, I was expecting to see something completely different, but the fact that all the underlying numbers look pretty good, I don't know. It might just be a different version of Severino that's serviceable, but just doesn't have as high of upside as he once did.